Okay, I've got some vocal there, and this is part two of BISS 4403 Data Admin. This is a class that meets on Thursday nights, of course, and as I've spoken with you, we'll divide the class into what I call the ground-based portion. That is from 6 till about 7:15 or 7:30. We'll meet over at Bailey Business Center in the lab, and we'll cover material, and then sometime after that, but before the next class session, I'll add part two. So we're at a pretty convenient juncture. Just to kind of give us a quick overview, we've gone through all of the course resources and information that's there. It's available for you. We've talked about those resources. Okay, so I'll close this back up. And then in 0 week, we did an introduction to the course in which I referred to many of the resources there, talking about the need to collect and to sort data and to pull data and mine it, if you will, from large data sets that companies collect, and how we use that and convert it into information that we can use to make decisions. And we talked about that a great deal. And here in week number one, we talked about the data warehouse concept and the idea of information design. And each of these here are resources, okay, that cover that type of thing. And so we have had a good overview of databases, how and why we use them. And so now we're ready to move into that stage. We've talked about, we took Northwind Traders, which is a database, a model provided by Microsoft as a way for us to see kind of like to get started. It's a good model in which one could get started. And then one of the resources I had here for you was a fact sales table. This fact sales XLS file. This was a table or from a query, but it's a fact. It's a fact table query or result or data set, and we exported it out to Microsoft Excel. And we talked about how I could take that data then and process it in that environment. And of course, today, as I've said before and will say many times, the commercial products that exist for you to use are often going to have a combination of the two of these capabilities: the capabilities of a database, the capabilities of a spreadsheet, and what I call a spreadsheet and analytic and visualization tool. Okay, and also had alerted you to 5 of the most important data visualizations of all time, and this is a nice resource that's out there, and I would encourage you to take a look at it, because you'll see how things have evolved in our ability to take data, turn it into information by, one, organizing it into tables where it can be easily sorted and filtered and operated on mathematically if it's mathematical in nature. And number two, applications we have that can portray that data in a way that presents a pattern that we understand. Okay, so all of that being said, we're kind of jumping now into week 2 a little bit. And before I do that, I want to take us out to just a quick resource that talks about database models, okay? And we're going to open this in a new browser window. And this is a nice chart that shows us the different types of databases that we have, okay, and how we design them. And this is a resource for you that's almost like a textbook, but it will walk you through the different types of models and that are there, and it's pretty easy reading. And we're going to be working primarily with relational databases. Okay? And there's some other models out there: hierarchical, network, object-oriented. Now, when we talk about objects, what we're talking about is the use of graphics, or what we call the graphics user interface, to represent code or data or combinations of code and data. So while we are working on we'll be working with a relational database, it also incorporates object-oriented database models. So it lets us use and call up data and use and call up programming code in an easy way. I just see it. I drag and drop the file. I see it, a toolbar, etc. And that's really what all they're talking about. And entity relationship models, they walk us through those. So there's a lot here, and I think it would be worth your time to look at them. There are also those that are out on the web. They're based on and what we're called non-SQL types of database. So I think it would be worth your while to take a look at those database models. It's a nice resource, and I think well worth our time and energy. And so we'll go back over to the modules now, and we're going to start working on the lunches database. And I want to talk about that for just a moment. It's from the Patrick text. And so when we have class, or when we have class, we have the ground-based class, or when we have a virtual session like this, this is our virtual session, you will need to have the SQL Fundamentals textbook. And I'm going to open up a new tab over here. And I'm going to go over to Amazon. And I'm going to do a search on this. And it's SQL Fundamentals. Third edition by John Patrick. So when you hear me talk about the Patrick text, that's what we're talking about. Here it is. So you'll want to buy that textbook, and the book is very, very easy to understand, and I'm going to walk you through that, and I think you'll find it's highly useful. What we're going to do is we're going to use the Patrick text as a guidebook that shows us how to put together structured query language, how we use the design view within Access, how we use some of the other tools like indexing. And so by the time we come to the end of the course, we will have run many, many queries. Now, this is going to be important to you because at the end of the course, I'm going to give you a project, and it's going to be working with the various check your understandings that are throughout the text. There's usually at least one of those in the textbook, in the chapter. So we'll be working with that. Now I've got, again, some resources here for you. And of course, on the 14th, you have the POTSI exam. That'll be due. And here again are some practical examples of why we need to use databases and what we can do with them for good. Now, I'm going to get us started by going into the files section. Let me open this back up now. Database models is down to 3. And we've worked on Access Workshops 1, 2, 3, and 4. You know what those to upload them, and you know what the files are, and we've talked about them, so you're good to go there. This is the Potsy textbook. That's chapter 2. And that's the textbook on Microsoft Access. Okay. Now, and you see we've got some interesting resources here. And then in week 4, we'll start to work on the lunches database. Now, over in 20 pages, 23 through 30 of the Patrick text, he gives us an introduction to queries. He gives us an introduction to structured query language, what it is, how he uses it. In fact, in chapter 1, he talks about how we take data and store it, okay? And he gives you some background about SQL, some background about what is a relational database. And then over there on page 7, he walks us through some of the major products that are based on structured query language or use it. And then he begins over on page 9 to talk about how we store data in tables. And walks us on through the concept of records or rows, and then the concept of columns. Those are the attributes and dimensions. Okay. And talks about that each cell should represent one thing. And he does a good job over there on page 16 of talking about that. And the notion of a primary key. And then over on page 18 and 19, he talks about the shapes of tables. He says most tables have more rows than they have columns. That's because we focus on attributes or dimensions of some person, place, or thing. Okay? It's about as simple as I know how to make that. And then he gives us an example of a table over on page 20. And so you could see it if you've had BISS 1123 of data problem analysis. This is not new territory. This is pretty familiar territory. Talks about some of the differences between Oracle and Access. And throughout this book, we're going to see code that's written for Oracle, code that's written for Access. As we come to the end of the course, you have an optional project, if you choose to do it, where you would download and use what I would call kind of a baby type of Oracle. So you'll get that opportunity. Now, the lunches database, all right, he talks about that over on page 23 and begins to walk through. There in 24 in the textbook, 24, he talks about the tables. He says there are 7 tables in that database. And then he walks us through those tables, the employees tables, the departments, a table of constants, foods, suppliers, and lunch items. And he takes us through that and shows us what each of them are, what they look like, and so forth. So that's pages 23 through 30. You should read that and get a good idea of what he's talking about, because then it gets us ready to begin to run queries and to work with the table. So we're going to go into the files section, and we're going to get we're going to look for the lunches database. And there's a file called lunches database done. And then I've got the DB6, DB7, each of the cases. He works through each of the chapters. And now and I've got, let's see, I'll go ahead and I'll make some of these published. I'll publish that. Okay. Now there's a database called SQL Fun, and that's the one that we're going to be working from all of the time. And what we're going to see is this data, this SQL Fun that database is our warehouse. It's our data warehouse where we have our tables, we have our data stored, and we're going to run queries from them. I'm going to diminish this down because you'll want to download that access file. And so I'm going to go ahead and do it. Just make sure everybody, and so I'm going to download, and as I usually do, I'm using Chrome. I show it in the folder, and that allows me then to throw it on my desktop. Now, this is from Lunch's Database 3. And you'll see I have Lunch's Database 1 Harmon. So this is the one we're going to work with. It would be the SQL Fun. All right. And I'm going to just rename this Harmon. And I'm going to do Lunch's DB1. I think I've already got one over there named that. So I'm probably going to get a conflict issue going on. Lunch's DB1 Harmon or SQL Fun. All right. And that's our data warehouse. Let's open this up and take a look at it. You'll need to have your textbook with you. And we want to enable the content. Okay. And I'm going to take the file and I'm going to save it as a database. Okay. And I'm going to put it on my desktop so I have it to work with. And we'll replace it. Okay. Now, let's talk about this database. All right. And we've got these tables, the alphabet table, dual. Let's look at the alphabet because this is one of those tables of constants and it's just the alphabet. That's all it is. Sometimes we need to use something like this. This is called dual. This has dummy columns in it, or we can count columns. This is one for constants, and this is one that has a budget, and this is the owner name, Susan Brown, and Susan has the company at Citywide Uniform and has a lunch budget of $200. I assume they take people out to lunch or they get paid or reimbursed for the lunch. Now, we've also have for departments, and let's look at that. This is another one of these dimension tables. As you may recall, if you took business problem analysis with me, we did 6 access cases at the end of the course, and one of the things we did was we created lookup tables, so that when we had a table, it had drop-down menus, or we could force the person inputting data to choose one of them. Okay, and we talked about that as a way to achieve data integrity, etc., which is fine, good, no problem. So this is that type of table that we would use. And I'll close it off here. Now we come to the employees table. Again, this is a dimensions table. You say, what do you mean? Well, think of these as some aspect of an employee. A first name, a last name, a department code. When were they hired? What's their credit limit? What's their phone number? Who do they report to? And this tells us everything about those employees, who their manager is. And so we're in good shape there. Now we have one of these, Carol Ann Rose, who is listed here as listed in accounting and doesn't have a phone number or a credit limit or a hire date. So that would be one we would be concerned about, because we would want to say, why don't we have data for this person? Okay, now I'm going to close this table off. Close the table. All right, I'm going to diminish the. I'm going to diminish down the SQL fund, and we're going to go back in here. Okay, and let's close this, and we're going to go back into the files area, and we're going to find the code for the Patrick materials. Find the I think it's a zip file. There it is. And I'm going to download this. And as it pops up here on my screen, you'll see it's got the code for specific chapters. It has SQL fund, and it has revisions. And what we want is the code for the chapters. So I'm just going to simply take this and throw it on my desktop. And hopefully it will be there. There it is, the access code. Or let's just do this again, just to make sure. Yeah, we'll replace the file in the destination. All right. So we're good. So you should have on your desktop, you're following along, you should have your copy of SQL Fund, and you can rename yours to your last name, and that would be Lunches DB1. And then here's the access code. Now let me open this up for a moment. I'll show you what we're talking about. Okay, here's the code for each of the chapters. Here's the code for chapter 1. Okay. And I'm going to open it up here for just a moment, and we'll take a look at it. As he mentions, it doesn't have any SQL, but it shows some results of running it. And then he has it divided into 112 and 114. These are problems. And let me start with these. All these queries, these are the very basic, what we call select queries. And the select queries are those that all we do is we say, okay, I want to get some data from a table. So you see the code here, we're going to select, and the asterisk is a wildcard which says I'm going to select everything from the employees table. Okay. You say, why don't I just go in and click on it and open it up? Well, one of the nice things about a graphic user interface is that you don't have to write the code here if you want to just simply see the contents. Okay. Now, if you would want to copy that, you could copy a table. This shows you the code just to retrieve everything and then save it as a query from a data set. Okay. So that's chapter 1. Now, we're going to move over here to chapter 2, all right? And we're going to start to work on it. And here's the access SQL for chapter 2. Now, he's going to show us examples, all right, of how we can run. He's going to show us the Oracle version and the SQL version, and then what he calls a dual or combined version, which shows us this is code that would work in either one. And if you have, and over on page 30, 1 of your text, it gives you an overview of everything in the chapter. Now, we're not going to run all the queries. We're going to hit the highlights, okay? And the we're going to look at those that I think are going to be the most useful for you to understand what's going on, okay? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time repeating, having to run the same type of query over and over and over. It's senseless. Once you run a particular type of query, and you've got the code, it just becomes a matter of doing a little bit of adapting, and you've got a set of code you can use and reuse over and over. That's the beauty of it. Okay, now let's look at this. Over on page 32 of the textbook, you see again, this is why, to get the most out of this, whether I'm doing a part 2, this virtual session, or we're over at Bailey in the ground-based portion on Thursdays, you're not going to get anything from this if you don't have the book with you and open and following along. I'm just going to tell you that right now. And you're going to be one of those people when we come down to running these, when I give you the check your understanding assignments, you're going to be lost as a goose in a rainstorm. And at that point, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for the simple reason I've gone through, I've shown you these examples, and you've had all this material, you've had the text to explain it. So it's these workshops are designed to get you ready. They're like practice, is the analogy of practicing. So you're ready when it's game time. And that's projects that I'm going to give you where I ask you to run some code. Over on page 23, they show you, he shows you a great example of the whole process of data mining. You'll hear people use that term, or using a data warehouse. Notice there that he's got that beginning table with all of those columns and rows, and we run some code and we get what we want, a result set. Okay, just like you go to the grocery store, you go to the grocery store, you don't buy everything there, you just select what you want to get. Okay, so here is this is out of 2.2. All right, and it's over in section 2.2, and he talks about an overview of the select statement. And this is what we would call the syntax or the components of it. And watch here in the middle of page 34 what he's talking about. With select, those are which columns to get from the table that has the data, which rows to get. Do we group them, or should they have some particular type of characteristic or value? And then how do we order the columns that are created? And talks about the query. And here it is. Here's page 35. And you'll notice there at the top of page 35, it says Oracle and Access SQL. Okay. And it means this is dual code. It will run on either one. And he shows us, and you'll see beside those, like select employee ID, you'll see some little numbers. Those are notes for you to go take a look at. For example, on that first line is a note number 1. And if you go over to page 36, you'll see the notes. So when he feels the need to explain some other things to you, he will put a note there. The other thing that you're going to notice as we go through this is not only will we run the query, but you're going to usually have an opportunity to see the beginning table, okay? And you're going to be able to see the result table, okay? And so here on page 35, in the middle of page 35, and this is the same code, and we're going to copy, okay? Copy that code. And I'm going to open up, I have SQL Fun open up. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to create a query. I'm going to click Create. I'm going to go to Query Design. All right. And I'm going to close. And I'm going to go down to the SQL view. And I'm going to click on this and see the data sheet view. That'll be the results set. And there it is. We have selected the employee ID, and the last name, and their credit limit. So this would be chapter 1 2-2. Okay. I'm just going to say this is call it CH1 2.2. I can't remember if it's going to let me use that to delineate or not. No, it won't. So I'm going to do 2-2. Okay. So that I know this is code I ran from chapter 1, section 2.2. Now, here's the data set. All right. Notice how much we've reduced. And one of the beautiful things about this technology is that I've run the query. And the query basically goes in and gets the information that I want, and only that, takes a picture and lets me see it. It's why we see this thing called a data sheet view. When we save that, what gets saved is the code, which takes up far less space and is far more economical. In the old days, we literally created a smaller table. We don't do that anymore. And you'll see as we move through the course how we can create a table, and we'll see it in the GUI form, and we'll also see it running code. Let's look at this for just a moment and think about it. We've got the data set view. Then we can go to the design view. This is the view. Most of you remember this when we worked in when you took business problem analysis with me. You recall in that course that we always worked at this level where we would choose a table and we would choose fields from that table, and then we'd execute the query. And then here's take the deep dive down into the SQL. You'll notice that we see the structure there, select, and then we see the fields. From what table, we identified that. And then we put a conditional statement here where the credit limit is greater than $20. And then we order them. And notice at the end of the query, there's a semicolon. And that says to the machine, stop now. So we've done, we got chapter 1.2. Now, when we meet next week, we're going to run through this. All right. And that way we'll be able to work on it. And then from here on out, we'll spend most of our time working on these queries. Now, that's over on page 35. Okay. And in page 37, after he gives us all those notes, he shows us, he begins to take a deep dive into the select clause and the different types. Select clauses. Okay. In the middle of page 38, he shows us select asterisk from one underscore employees. And all that's saying is, I want to see everything in that table. You said, well, why wouldn't you just click on it? You can. That's the beauty of having the graphic user interface. If I want to, I can just click on it and see it. Now, he introduces us over in 2.4 to the use of a column alias. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to save it, and I'll close it off. And he gives us some code at the bottom of page 39 where he talks about the use of an alias. One of the cool things is about a database is I can use a column alias, so I can rename a column maybe to make it more understandable. I can also use table aliases. So if I want to reuse the same table, I can literally give it different names and pull even more data from it. That's why this is such powerful technology, because the insights we can get in it, we can get so relatively easy. Bottom page 39 is 2.4. Let's go in and we'll take a look at the code that he has. And he shows us there's that 2.3. Here's 2.4. Okay. And we're going to copy it. And I'm going to click create. And I'm going to go to query design. And we'll go down to the SQL view. Okay. Now let's talk about this for just a moment. And I'll pop it back up here so you can see a little easier. What it's saying is, okay, we're going to select the employee ID and we're going to call it employee number. Okay. We're going to get all the information from the phone number column and we're going to rename it as extension. Then we're going to use what we call a hard key, and that's that excellent worker as evaluation. Now, he gives us an explanation about that hard key over there on page 41. Okay. And this is when we hard code something in other words, excellent worker. All right. That's a constant for a particular set of employees that we're going to call out of that database. And it's called a literal because we're going to we'll put a single quote. Sometimes Access will want double quotes. We'll talk about that. And it'll have excellent worker as evaluation. And then 10 as a rating. So we're giving these columns an alias. Now we're doing that for a couple of purposes. One is to make it more understandable to the end user. And number two is to mask the names of those tables for security reasons. Okay. And then we're going to get it from the employees table. So let's look at the data set. And there it is. Now, frankly, this is the kind of thing that can really aggravate you. So if I want, we did a little bit of this in business problem analysis. I'm going to come back and I'm going to go to the design view. Okay. And I'm going to click on this box and it will suppress that output. Okay. And let's go back up now to the data sheet view and look at it. You say, well, why would you do that? Well, if I want to, I can save this query with a name that telegraphs what's there. And I'm going to call this chapter 2. And this would be 2.4 excellent workers. Now, I'm also going to show you a protocol here that is later on when we have to maybe invoke the name of a table. It's just much easier for us to pull everything together and use you can use the underscores if you wish. Those are annoying to me. So I just pull everything together. See? Now I know that these are the excellent workers that have that rating. And by suppressing it, I don't have that good employee, excellent employee over and over and over. And I telegraph that I could go in if I want, and I can also go in and suppress the rating. And let's go back in here and we'll just do this to clean it up a little bit. Okay. And so I'm going to go back into the design view. I'm going to suppress that. And we'll go up and we'll take a look at the data sheet view. All right. And I'm going to telegraph what's in here even more. And I'm going to save it. Okay. And I'm going to close it off. And then I'm going to find that queries. So I've run the query. And I'll go down here now. And when I always, typically I want to have all access objects open. Okay. And so we do here. But I'm going to say, okay, I want the queries. That's what I've been running here. And let's see here. Then you'll see there's one that's telegraphs employees rated 10. Here's chapter 2, and then 2-4, excellent workers, and I'm going to just simply rename it. Rated 10. You'll see I already have one down here of employees rated 10. Now let's look at that for just a moment. So I just get rid of all the redundancies. I know these are employees who are rated 10. And let's go into the design view, and we should be able to see. We've got them in there. We've got the 10 rating of 10. We added the literal of excellent worker. And so we'll open up our table here. And if I wanted to avoid any confusion, naming conventions, I'm going to do this. I'm going to close this off, and I'm going to rename this. Chapter 2, Part 2-4, excellent workers. Okay. So we've run those queries, and then we did a little of this in business problem analysis, but it's important to understand I can use a thing called a literal where I put input text that flags a particular file. Because if we go back up here and we go in and we look at the in the employees table, we're going to see not all of them had a rating of 10. So at this point, we've worked through part 2.2-4, it's pages 38 and 39. And over on page 40, this is why it's so important for you to have the book, okay, with you, so you can really see this. At the top of page 40, you're going to see, okay, the beginning table, and then under it, the result table for 2.4, the code that you ran. And you can see that by suppressing that evaluation column and the rating column, all right, I can use the title of the query, the name of it, to telegraph what's in there. Okay, because who wants to look at that over and over? I get the point. They have a rating of 10 in their evaluation. Um, at the bottom, page 40, the author offers us some of these caveats where he talks about using spaces in the column alias. And he shows that in Oracle, they use double quotes. In Access, they put it as employee number in brackets. Okay. He talks about adding in that literal. Now, there are going to be some times where, as I walk you through a particular chapter of Lunch's database, and we will be starting to work ahead. I'll just tell you, we can look at the code, and you have the book, and you can see, and there's really nothing there for you to do. Page 42 is a good example of this. Here is a simple select query where we're going to get everything from the employees table. And here's the beginning table, okay? And then there's the result table. This is section 2.5. And the truth is, look, folks, one of the nice things about databases is that they have a graphic user interface. What you say, what do you mean? Well, here I'm looking at the queries, and I've got these little objects, these little pictures. These are really just little pictures with text in them that show me, okay, what's there, what data and what code. And so if I want to see it, I just click on it and I look at it. So 2.5 is almost superfluous, because you know that working in Access and in most databases today, you can use it. It has a GUI, graphic user interface environment. I can click on a table, I can open it and see it. I can double click. I can save it. I can copy it. I can delete it with a key just simply with those commands, handling them like a regular file. Okay. So he walks you through giving you some notes. Then over on page 60, on page 43, the author shows you adding a where clause. Okay. And this is what he calls Oracle and Access SQL variation 1. And that's down here in his code that he gives us. And here it is, variation 1. Okay. And he shows us, we of course have the beginning table over there in the employees table. And then he shows us the variation. And what this author is going to do is going to show us how to achieve the same thing using some different kinds of techniques. So there are going to be some times I'll say, well, here's the first way he did it. Here's the second. Here's the third. And the author wants us to understand I can achieve these results following some different patterns. And this, the code in the middle of page 43 is what he calls variation 1. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to get employees where the manager ID is null. Okay. And here's variation 1. Select from the employees table where the manager ID is null. Here's a second one. Select from employees, order by last name. And that's variation 2. And so he's used this. We're selecting a particular, in the first variation, we're selecting people whose manager ID column is null. There's nothing in it. Then another is where we pull everything and we order it by last name. Okay. And since he didn't declare descending or ascending, the default in all databases is in ascending order. Then we see that we get the results set for 2.5. So you'll see there's some times I can just walk you through and show you in the text. And so there's really no need to run the code. All right. Over on page 44 and 45, he introduces a new concept, and this is one that we want to be, and this is using the select distinct clause, okay? And you're going to see it in the middle of page 46. Notice that he says we're going to select distinct manager ID for employees. So we're going to get the list of employees by their distinct employee manager. You'll see the results set at the bottom of page 45. There in the middle is the employees table. Then the results set is 2.6. So we're going to do that. And we're going to this is the select distinct clause. This is useful for us when we have people, say a number of people who report to a particular manager, and we want to get them, we want to get that ordered in a distinctive way, i.e. grouped, if you will. I'm going to go down to the SQL view. And then I'm going to get the data set. And there it is. Okay. And that's the manager ID. Now, if we go in here, let's go into the design view. Let's play with it for a minute, and let's just add in the last name and see what that looks like. And we'll take a top, then we'll go back upstairs. There's the, and so we know that Brown and Rose are managers. And then we have everybody that reports to manager ID 201, 202, 203. But we used the select distinct. And I'm going to call this, let's call this, I'm going to save this, and this will be chapter 2, part 2, 6, and this would be variation 1. Okay, and there it is. Now, I'm ready to do something just a bit different. And that's over on, now, on page 40, at the bottom of page 46. Well, at 46, we're going to do a variation. We're going to call this a 1A. Let's click Create. Query Design. Okay. And let's go back in here. Let's go down to the SQL. It's going to be easier to do it there. SQL. And I'm going to look at 2.6. And what he's doing here is he's saying, okay, select the employer, select the manager ID for those employees who have the manager ID of 201, 208, and 210. Okay. And then we'll get the null that won't appear. So I'm going to paste that in. And we'll get the data set. Okay. And we get that result. And so we selected the distinct manager ID, where the employee ID is 201, 202, 208, and 210. Okay. He said, well, why didn't we get something there? Well, it's simple. If you go back to the beginning table, you're going to see the employees 201, 208, and 210 don't have a manager ID, or the manager ID the manager ID is null. And if you go back to page 45, you're going to see that. And actually you have the two there. You have Susan Brown and Carol Rose. Now, up at the top of page, and we're not going to say that because you've seen it. We've messed with it. Up the top of page 47, all right, you'll see the variation number 2. And we use the select distinct manager ID from the employees table, and then we order that manager ID in descending order. That's that DESC, and then it shows you the result. And he says that the stuff that's null won't appear. Then we have a variation where he says, well, what if you didn't eliminate the word distinct? And this is what you'll get. And if you look at that, just the manager ID there at the bottom of page 47, and if you go back over to page 45 and you see the employee table, you're going to see that pattern. You have a null, then you have those 4 employees, 2 of them are 201, 2 of them are 202, and then a null, and then the 203, the 203, 201, and 203. And you'll see that. Now, if we want to create, kind of a quasi grouping, this is a way to do it. So you can see, as I mentioned to you, the author is going to walk us through several of these kinds of variations. And here he talks about using a select cause. This is page 48. Using a select distinct clause, select cause, to get the distinct values in 2 columns. And it's at the top of page 49, and this is 2.7. So we'll go back in here to the text, and we're going to find 2.7. Okay? Now, as we've walked through this, there are going to be times like this where if you have the book and you have your file open and the database open, we don't really need to run it. You'll see, if you haven't already, you'll start to see what we're going to get. And we're going to select distinct, the manager ID, okay, and then the credit limit. And we're getting that from the employees table. And if you see the result table at the bottom of page 49, it will show us those distinct IDs and manager ID and the credit limit, and you'll see the null values. Okay? So he'll show you the beginning table and the result table. Now, if you want, you could run this query and take the time and throw it in there. Okay? When I say, okay, upload lunches database 1, I'm going to expect to see some of this work in here. Usually you'll do what I'm probably going to have you do, or I'll save a file and say, oh, here's one, or I may have some what I call key files that are worked out already. But you can see as he's using these different variations. Now, over in chapter 20, over in page 50, the author introduces us to the where clause. And over there on page 51, 52, and 53, 51, and he walks you through all of the different ways that we can invoke the where clause, all the different operations that we can conduct. Those tables will be very useful to you when you're doing the check your understandings. And they're useful to me too when I want to perform something, because you're not going to memorize all of this. There's no way. And you're also not going to be running a lot of code. You'll be given queries to execute. Your boss will say, give me the sales figures for January for Wichita, January 2016 through 2018 for Wichita, Kansas. And okay, and you're good to go. The rest of the text there in chapter 2, he walks you through several variations using the where clause, like the equivalence statements. If you look over at page at the bottom, page 52, he shows you using equivalence where manager ID equal particular ID. Over page 54, he shows you where the first name equals Henry. There's a literal that we've inputted there. Where the hire date is 01 July 2008. That's Oracle. You have to be careful because if you look up at page 55, the date convention for Access is to always use the pound sign. I found it never goes wrong. And so they're looking at every employee who's hired on July. That's just the Access version of it. Same story with the bottom of page 55, where they walk you through, where the first name of every employee is Paula. Again, there's one of those literals. And then starting at page 56, he shows you using the where clause, using Boolean logic, where it's less than, greater than or equal to. And he shows you the examples of those. From page 56, 57, 58. And there in chapter, in chapter 2 over there in pages 58 and 59, he talks about the not equal condition. I want you to notice a pattern that occurs as we write this code, okay? The not equal, we start with where, not, and then declare the not, and it's the manager ID. So we're getting, so at the top of page 59, we're not going to get anybody whose manager ID is 203. Okay. I'll do a little bit more of this when we meet next Thursday night. And I think probably what we will do, and I'll just make a bookmark for myself so I know where I want to start us at. I'll make this to 14. Okay? And we'll start it. We'll finish off chapter 2. So we've covered quite a bit of material. And we'll start using the not equal condition because we've used the condition of equivalence. And see, the beauty of you having the code, text code open, the book open, and the database is that you can see we can learn a lot. We don't have to run these queries. The author has shown us the beginning table and the result table and provides some explanations for us. Okay? All right, I'm going to close this off. And I'm going to close off the database. And I'm going to stop the share and stop the meeting. And then we'll meet on next Thursday night. Will be our ground-based portion at 6 o'clock. And so you should look all this over in this CAS and be prepared, to start as we finish off chapter 2. But you can see the pattern now of how we'll be doing these workshops. And that's what's important. And don't forget, I have keys over there, and I'll say upload, this here. And let's look at that one more time so you don't get all these anxieties about what you ought to turn in. I'll go back over to the modules. Well, I'm just going to do lunches. And you'll see the lunches database done. DB 6, 7. Okay. And I even have, I think these are all the lunches database using the SQL fun. So the key thing is that you learn and you understand what's going on and not get too freaked out about making sure I've got the right value credit. It's work. This is a workshop, and you can upload the stuff we do that night, or you can upload these for your credit. But here's the point, and I can't make it enough. For you to get ready for the end of the course, when you have to run and develop some code and run some queries, you've got to be paying attention. You've got to be in the class or following me along in the live stream or watch the video carefully. That's what you do. You need to have access open. You need to have that text file open that the authors provided, and you need to have the book open to see how this is happening. Okay? And I will literally just walk you through and give you samples. And you see already, we've just started on chapter 2, because he's going to show us the where clause, and then he shows us the not equal clause. And then he walks us through a whole series of different kinds of variations in clauses. And you'll see that over on page 60. This is where we begin to do some of the tailoring of what we're after. And we'll talk about that some. Okay? All right, well, I'm going to stop the share for now. And I'm going to stop the recording and end the meeting, and then I'll post this over in Canvas.